Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hi, my name is Vanessa. I love to talk about books. Today I am going to be doing a video that I've been so excited for since I actually finished the series, but I've had trouble actually thinking about how I can put it into words, how much I'm so excited by the series, how much I loved it and enjoyed it, because I honestly don't think the words exist in the English language. But today we are going to be talking about my new favourite thing ever, and that's the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series. I did read book 1, 2 and 3 about 3 years ago, which is when I first picked up this series. I didn't read it as a child and I really regret not doing so. I only recently acquired books 4 and 5, so I was actually able to finish the series. So I thought in June what I would do is I would sit and I would binge read all of these without any gaps, reading something else, just so I could enjoy the series in full, and honestly it was the best decision that I've ever made. This video is probably going to be quite long. It's going to be suitable for everyone, whether you've read the series or not, and you will not get a spoiler if you listen to the following instructions. The first part of this video is going to be for people who have never read any of these books. You will not get spoiled by the plot of any of them. The next part is going to start going into more of a discussion and review of each individual book in the series, but it will be in order, separated, so there'll be no jumping between books. So if you've only read, for example, book 1 and book 2, I'll go into a spoilery discussion of book 1, then book 2, and then I'll start to go into book 3, 4 and 5. At that point you will have to stop after the end of book 2 so that you'll not get spoiled for the rest of the series. At the end, if I remember, I'll do a quick maybe spoilery wrap up of what I thought of the series in full and of the character development and the way the series is wrapped up with the events in the finale. I will leave the timestamps in the description below so you know when you can stop, or if you want to skip some of the books, or if you want to skip the spoiler free parts, that's fine. Just so you know which timestamps you can watch between without having certain things ruined for yourself. Holding these in one hand is getting quite heavy now, so I'm going to put them down and I'm just going to talk about the series in full while holding the first book, which is Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. I got halfway through filming this and decided that I needed to say this. If you are going to comment on a spoiler of a book in the comments, please put an initial comment saying something like, I'm going to talk about spoilers or something. Put that in a comment and then put a reply to it with your spoilery comment in, just so that people scrolling the feed don't see it. It's worked really well on my last review videos, and people were able to avoid spoilers, so I'd really appreciate it if you could do that when talking about some of the books. Like I've said, this part is spoiler free for people who have never read the series, so it's suitable for you. You'll not get spoiled. Percy Jackson and the Olympians is quite an old series by Rick Riordan. Let's just see when it first came out. First published in 2005. Like I said, I didn't read this until I was an adult, but I feel like that's had no effect on my enjoyment of this. I think it's great for people of all ages. Since finishing the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, Rick Riordan has gone on to do further spin-off series in the same world. He's done the Heroes of Olympus series and the Trials of Apollo, which I've never read, but I own, and the struggle is so hard not to just sit and binge read them and read nothing else for the month of July. But I feel like I want to give myself a bit of a break to prolong the excitement that I have over Rick Riordan books. This series follows the life and trials of Percy Jackson. In book 1, Percy Jackson is 12 years old, and with every subsequent book he ages 1 year. He lives in New York with his mum, and he starts the book off, he attends school, he's just a normal boy. He has a best friend named Grover, and he's on a school trip, and something odd happens on this school trip that he can't explain away with normal understanding of the world, and he comes to find out that his life is actually in danger because he is a half-blood. His mum has raised him on his own and he doesn't know who his dad is, but he comes to understand that his dad is actually one of the Greek gods who are still living and are still ruling the earth, really. They have such a big influence on the earth, and because of this, bad creatures are after him and want to put him in harm's way. His mom knows this. She's known this from the very start of his birth. She can see through the mist, which is something that blocks humans from actually seeing the magical things around them and seeing the gods themselves. Humans just see everything as normal, but every now and again a human will be able to see through this blanket over the magical world, and his mom was one of them, and she fell in love with one of the Greek gods and had a baby with him. So she is not unaware of who Percy is, and she has been trying to protect him throughout life, but it's come to a point in his life where she can no longer protect him and he needs to be around his own people and get some specific training. He ends up attending Camp Half-Blood, which is like a summer camp for the daughters and sons of the Greek gods, and once they've been claimed by their respective Greek god parent, they are then put into cabins according to who their parent is. So for example, Zeus has a cabin, Poseidon has a cabin, Hera, Apollo, Artemis, they all have their own cabins, and that's where the half-brothers and sisters live. So Percy actually gets to Camp Half-Blood and he doesn't know which cabin he belongs to because he doesn't know who his father is, because he's yet to be claimed by him. He is claimed by his father in the book, but that starts off a whole load of problems for him, and it is also known that the Greek gods are facing some anger amongst themselves because Zeus, who is seen as sort of the more prevalent of the gods, his lightning bolt has been stolen, and they think that it could have been orchestrated with help of a demigod. Percy ends up in the firing line for this, and he tries to attempt to solve the riddle of what's gone on with Zeus's missing lightning bolt. He ends up establishing a little friendship group which follow him throughout the series. You have Annabeth, who is a daughter of Athena. Athena is the goddess of wisdom, and Annabeth is a really smart girl, and she kind of reminds me a little bit of Hermione, but with a lot more charisma and a lot more going for her. She's very funny in the book. And also Grover, who is not a demigod, he's a half goat. And eventually in the other books, storylines are developed for each of them, and they're so fleshed out as characters, they honestly feel like real people. And I can't wait to see what the Disney Plus series does with their characters, because there's so much to them. Just as much as Percy is the main character, all of the characters in this are so well fleshed out, and they all have their own struggles and their own adventures that they're trying to overcome. There is more characters that are equally as fantastic and are introduced as the series develops into the later books, and usually I find it hard to adapt to when new characters are added to an already established book series. I sort of feel like, where was the need in that? But honestly, the characters that are added later on are some of my favourite characters of the entire series, and it just kept going from strength to strength for me. I would recommend this for people of all ages. On the back it doesn't actually say who can read it upwards, but I'd say maybe people of 12 and up. Me from the future, I've just checked the back of the last two books and it says suitable for ages 9 and up. This would be really suitable for, but I think as an adult I really appreciated the humour in this book. It is so funny, some of the way it's just written, some of like the jokes that are added in are really funny. It's one of the funniest book series that I've actually ever read, and it's for kids, so I really love that. I think Rick Riordan's such an intelligent author. These books are so easy to read. The whole premise of them actually seems quite juvenile, but it's not. It actually goes into some really deep issues about family and friendship and relationships, and I just really loved it. Now what I will say for people that might think I'm going to give that series a go, books 1, 4 and 5 are my favourite. Unfortunately books 2 and 3 I feel like aren't as good. They're great books but they're not as good, and I know some people read book 1 and really enjoy it and then move on to book 2 and feel like a little bit of a slump in the series, but I do promise you that if you stick with that book and read books 3, 4 and 5, they just get better and better. Book 4 is probably my absolute alright favourite because there is so much happening in it. There's so much adventure in book 4, and it does have a lot of mystery. There is one overarching bad guy throughout the entire series, so it's not a selection of individual adventure stories. You do have to read them in order because one specific line plot goes through the entire series. It's introduced in book 1 very briefly, and then it just kicks off throughout the rest of the books, and that villain storyline is absolutely fantastic. Honestly, it is just so good the way that it's developed. The world building is really great. It's done really well. So you are obviously introduced to the Greek gods, and they live in Olympus, which can be accessed via the Empire State Building through the 600th floor, which obviously doesn't exist. But that is the way that a demigod would access Olympus. And they live up there, and Zeus has control over the skies, Poseidon has control of the oceans, and Hades sits in hell, or their version of hell, where souls of the dead go. And Hades is seen as a little bit of a villain. Zeus, Poseidon and Hades are seen as the big three. They are three brothers whose father is Kronos, and Kronos is a titan who has been chopped up by his gods that he produced and put in the bottom of a pit, hopefully to never rise again. So Zeus, Poseidon and Hades are the biggest, most powerful of the brothers, and they relate a lot of previous historical events as having been caused by them, and when they fall out you see the effects of that on Earth in some of the events. So like they blame world wars on them, for example. When they fall out is when humans start going to war. So they are the main three gods that are prevalent in the storylines of the plot. However, you do meet the other gods as well. Artemis plays a big part in this, as does Athena, Hera, Apollo. Ares plays a really interesting part in it too, who is the god of war. And all of these people have children who are in this world, so you can just imagine how many characters are actually in this series, and they're all well developed. If I had to describe this series in a couple of words, I would just say it's a fun, friendly, happy adventure. And honestly, you can buy the entire box set of the series now for like £12, which is an absolute bargain for the amount that you get in here and the amount of happiness in these books. £12 is nothing. So if you haven't read these but you're looking for a middle grade that's very friend orientated with really well developed characters that are both male and female, honestly, this series is just amazing. So now I'm going to get into the bit that I'm most excited for, and that is the spoilery discussions of each of these books, because I just love to recap what's actually been in them. So at this point I would only progress if you've read book 1. So in book 1 we are introduced to Percy, Annabeth, Grover and some of the other characters, like the people at Camp Half-Blood. We are also introduced to Luke, who we realise at the end of the novel may have gone a little bit bad. Some of my best moments from this book are the fact that Percy's mum is such a loving mum. She's so nice, and I feel awful that she had to stay with Gabe, because Gabe was such a smelly, horrible human that he covered Percy's aura of being a half-blood to hide him from the monsters. Because I read this as an older person, I was trying to put myself in Percy's shoes as being a 12-year-old and having to deal with all this. And Percy comes across as really mature in the books. And I can't remember what I was like as a 12-year-old, so I don't know if that was like a realistic perspective to have as a 12-year-old. I feel like me as at 12 wouldn't really have the logic to process that my world was a lie and that I had to fight and kill people. But it does feel natural because it feels innocent, like his friendships with Annabeth, and he does seem like he is trying to start to understand what is good and what is bad and what he needs to do to be a good person. One of my favourite scenes, which I thought sort of conveyed this whole series' vibe, is when they go into the cafe and they meet Medusa, and it's horrible because obviously she's trying to do something bad to them, but Grover really comes out with some really funny things in that scene, and I feel like it portrays exactly the wittiness but also the drama of the book series really well. At the heart of this series, bad things are happening, evil things are happening, and it's sad that Percy needs to spend his summers trying to save the world, but at the same time this underlying casualness is really, really good. The big plot twist at the end of this book was that Hades isn't actually the bad person, that the bad person is Luke and something brewing at the bottom of Tartarus, which they think might be Kronos. But I love that he set this book up for one plot, which seemed to be like an argument between brothers, but then hinted that everything's not all as what it seems, and that there may be something more dark and sinister going on beneath what you thought was the plot. I rated this book 5 out of 5 stars after I read it, The next two I rated 4 out of 5 stars, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about book 2 and why I didn't really enjoy book 2 as much. So at this point, if you've only read this book, I would stop here. If you've carried on with the series, continue with the video. So book 2 is the shortest of the series, and it's not my favourite, but it's still a great book on its own accord. In this book, we see Percy and Annabeth thinking that Grover might be in trouble. Percy has started having dreams that Grover is in a cave and that he might be getting held prisoner there by a Cyclops. However, there's some bad things happening at Camp Half-Blood. The tree that was the daughter of Zeus has started to fade, and she's the person who keeps a barrier or a protective shield around Camp Half-Blood. The plan is that somebody needs to go out and find the golden fleece, which can be put onto the tree to heal it, to then restore the protective powers around camp. Clarice, who I've not mentioned so far, but she is honestly one of my favourite characters of all time in literature. She is sent on her quest to try and retrieve the golden fleece. However, Percy and Annabeth feel like this could have something to do with Grover's current situation, so they go out and they're encouraged to by, I think it's Hermes that encourages them to go and on a rescue mission for Grover, hoping that at the same time they might come across the golden fleece. However, Clarice obviously isn't happy about this because she wants to be the hero of the day, and she feels very attacked by Percy and Annabeth. I love that Clarice has this whole characterization that she is not necessarily bad, because she's not a bad person, she just doesn't get on with Percy. She's not a bully or anything, even though she's done some very questionable acts in the first book, but I love that it's sort of like not everybody can be friends. Another main character is introduced into this book that isn't introduced in the first one, and that is Tyson. When I first read this book, as I said, I'd read the first 3 a couple of years ago, I didn't like the idea of them introducing a brother for Percy, but once you actually read a little bit about who he was and how he's a Cyclops, and that means that maybe his human form isn't representative of his actual age because he's actually a much younger Cyclops, so he's not as developed. You know, I just felt so sorry for him, and I had so much love for Percy that he took him under his wing, because Percy does have a little bit of a hero complex. He does like to be the person that saves the day, and that he actually takes on Tyson. I feel like Percy underlyingly loves that he's the only child of the big 3, so when Tyson comes along at the start, he is a bit negative towards him, but he does grow to love him in a brotherly way, and I love that so much. And after reading this series as a whole, I would say that Tyson's introduction in this book makes this such a great book and such an addition to the series, because you can't really have Tyson without having this book, because this book goes a lot into Cyclopses and the way they're perceived by heroes and gods, and without having that storyline with Grover, you wouldn't get to fully appreciate why Tyson might be a little bit discriminated against with the rest of the demigods. So moving on to what I actually really liked about the plot. One of the standout elements of this book for me was when Annabeth wanted to see what the sirens would show her when they're passing by this specific island with sirens on. What she asked Percy to do is for him to block his ears and steer the ship as normal, but to tie her to a mast and let her hear what the sirens are singing so that she can see them in their true form and see what they would show her about what she wants deep down, because Annabeth is very confused about how she feels, what she wants. She's got a lot of problems with her family life, and she just wants to see what she desires the most. Now, the biggest shock is that she sees her mum and dad together happy on a beach, but then she also sees Luke. And at that point, I was just a bit like, how dare you do Percy so bad? Because I really loved them together, and that was something that I realised in this book, was that they had such a special bond, and they were either going to become best friends or boyfriend and girlfriend. And when she saw Luke on the beach, I was like, no girl, no, he's bad for you. But you know, you just have to read the rest of the books to see how that pans out. Luke himself in this book cements himself more as a villain and more of a baddie. I secretly have a soft spot for him, but I hated his character at the same time because he just came across as so naive, like, what you doing, boy? But at the same time, you can see that he sees himself as having so much potential for gaining power and gaining this status that he wouldn't have as if he just sort of like lay down in Camp Half-Blood and was a demigod. So I totally see what he's doing. I just don't agree with it, and that boy needs a slap across the butt because, oh, he's so bad. Like worse than Draco Malfoy bad. And then obviously we have this very big turning point in the last sentence of the book where the Golden Fleece is found, Grover is saved, and they return to Camp Half-Blood, and the Golden Fleece actually fixes the tree beyond what they imagined, and Talia, daughter of Zeus, is awakened from the tree. Upon finishing this book, you then start to think about what is going to happen in the next one, because now a new child of the big three is here, and what does that mean for the prophecy? So we finish that book, and you're going to finish this video here if you haven't read any more than that, and then come back to find out what I think of the next one. But for now, for those who have read it, we're going to talk about Percy Jackson and the Titan's Curse. I'm sorry, this book is so shiny. I don't know what is wrong with this cover. I obviously bought these secondhand at different times, so the first two are sort of like the same print run, and the last two are the same sort of theme, like cover wise, but this middle one, what's that noise? But this middle one is a weird shiny edition that has a sticker on it saying win a trip to the real Camp Half-Blood in the US. It's a real place? It's a real place, apparently. Oh, okay. I want to know what happened to the people that actually won that competition. Did they ever come back alive? So book 3, I'm going to hold it this way to stop the light from being weird on it. So book 3 wasn't my favourite at all. I rated this 4 out of 5 stars, like I've said before. Maybe, I don't know, maybe this one was the worst in the series for me, but it is so important because so much happens in it, and this is the book that sets up for the last two, which just take off. So in book 3, we're introduced properly to Talia and who she is as a person and some of their history with Talia and Annabeth and Luke. We are then introduced to another 2 of the very, very main characters, who are Bianca and Nico. Nico is probably on tie with Percy and Annabeth for my favourite characters. Actually, maybe Nico and Annabeth are my favourite characters of all time. I love Nico so much. I'm so pleased he was introduced to the series because he is just... And I feel like I've not read the other books, but I think that Nico is in the series going forward as well, which is exciting. But I don't know if he's in Trials of Apollo or if he's in Heroes of Olympus, so I would appreciate some little guidance on that in the comments. At the start of this book, Grover has gone on a mission to find more half-bloods, and he thinks that he's picked up the scent of 2 in a high school. So Annabeth and Percy and Talia go on this mission to see if they can help Grover bring them 2 half-bloods back to camp. However, Percy totally messes up this mission, and it results in Annabeth going missing, presumed dead, and they require help from Artemis and her hunters. Artemis is a god who appears, or who prefers to appear, as a young girl, and she has a band of recruited young girls who are part of like a little personal army. Bianca is given the opportunity by Artemis to join her group, and she takes that offer because she feels like she wants to, as much as she loves Nico, she's tired of looking after him and having that responsibility, and because they are orphans, she sees that as a family opportunity, so she takes it, much to the upset of Nico. We don't see much more of Nico until the very end of the book. Unfortunately, Bianca has died during the mission to recover Annabeth and Artemis, because Percy also sees in a dream that Artemis is being held captive with Annabeth and she's holding up the world, literally. So they need saving. So a group of her hunters, which includes Bianca, Zoe Nightshade, Talia and Percy and Grover, go on a rescue mission, and sadly Bianca doesn't come back. She does die in the process of trying to save them, and Nico takes this so bad, and he reacts in a way which Percy realises he's actually the son of Hades. Because just when you think you're getting a feast, this book series turns into an all-you-can-eat buffet. It is just so good. And now we have 3 children of the big 3 and a prophecy. So who's it about? We don't know. The main reason that this book fell short for me was because it felt a little bit simplistic in the fact that it's just a rescue mission and it's mainly just about the rescuer group moving from point A to point B, and the only real action is at either end of that. Even though it is still a good book and it's really important and there's a lot that we need to understand about the characters, it still just felt a little bit like short when the rest of them are so action-packed and so good. But I don't know whether that's a little bit of me not enjoying the lack of Annabeth as well, because she is one of my favourite characters throughout, but where this one falls short, the other two definitely make up for it in abundance. So at this point I am going to move on to book 4, which is probably my favourite of the series. It's closely followed by book 5, so exciting times. So moving on to book 4, obviously I didn't know what to expect from this one, considering I had an amazing experience with the first one, and book 2 and 3 were just great. I was very nervous about going into this one because I didn't want this to take another little like step down for the series. And also Battle of the Labyrinth, I was like, what could that possibly be? But it's an adventure and a half, I swear. So much happens in this. It's got such a good vibe. It's got such a good atmosphere. Oh, I love it. I loved it. Some parts gave me the creeps, some parts made me cry, some parts made me laugh. And there is so much character development across all of the main characters and a lot of the side characters as well. I think this might be one of the longest books. Book 5 I think is the longest, then this one, then the first one. So it has a lot to unpack. So this book starts off, Percy is at camp and they're playing just a normal camp game, and him and Annabeth come across a tunnel that wasn't there before. Percy thinks nothing of it really, but Annabeth becomes very concerned about this because she knows that it's part of the bigger structure of the labyrinth, and they do become aware that this would be Luke's way into camp, or his only way into camp when the war starts. So Percy and Annabeth know that they need to, 1, guard or close off this tunnel, and 2, prevent Luke from finding the way through the tunnel. And they think the only way that they can stop all of this happening is by finding or navigating to the centre of the tunnel to find its curator. Annabeth's hope is that once they find the curator of the labyrinth, either him or his works, they'll be able to either convince him to help them, or she'll be able to find a way to prevent Luke from finding a magic artifact which will help him navigate the labyrinth to Camp Half-Blood, because the labyrinth covers like half of America and they think they're sort of banking on the fact that it is hard to navigate once you're in there. The majority of the book is spent in the labyrinth. There's Percy, Annabeth, Grover and Tyson, I believe, that go into the labyrinth, and a lot of it is just about them getting lost and not finding what they're looking for and being stuck in such a small space, and you really feel that in the atmosphere of the book. There feels like an overwhelming dread, and it is a different tempo to the rest of the books, but it does set up nicely for going into the conclusion, where you're obviously going to expect the biggest, the baddest of events to occur. The best character development in this book is seen for Tyson and Nico. Tyson really gains a lot of confidence in this one and comes into himself as a hero, and Nico, he's really struggling to come to terms with who he is as the son of Hades. He's grieving for his sister and he wants to bring her back. He blames Percy for everything going wrong in his life, and he's so troubled, and you just kind of like want to give him a big hug and tell him everything is going to be okay if you just do the right thing. And you can really tell that he's struggling, and his struggles are so painful because he is such a young character. And I'm really looking forward to seeing who they cast for Nico, especially for the Disney Plus adaptation. He's probably the one I'm looking forward to the most, to seeing what the actor does with that role and the pain that the character faces in that role. My favourite scene of the entire series actually is in this book, and I don't know why I love it so much because it has none of my favourite characters in, and that is when Percy finds himself on Calypso's island. I would love to see a spin-off book happen about what would have happened if Percy stayed with Calypso, because honestly when he was on that raft sailing away from it, my heart was just like ugh. You probably didn't really understand what that was, but that was just me basically saying I was heartbroken. And speaking of Percy with love interests, we are introduced again to a character who we saw very, very briefly in book 3 or book 2. I can't remember which one it was, but we are reintroduced to Rachel Dare. Rachel Dare is a character we saw for literally a couple of minutes in a previous book, but she helps save Percy when he's at Hoover Dam, and she can see through the mist. She could see Riptide when he pulled it out in all its glory. And Percy ends up going to a new school at the start of the book and sees her there, and she does witness something go down between Percy and some monsters, so he becomes honest with her and tells her the truth about who he is, and she takes that in her stride and says it makes a lot of sense for some of the experiences that she's had throughout her life. This channel is now a mukbang channel because I remembered I had arrows in the fridge and I literally just got up mid-sentence and ran for an arrow. So let's talk a little bit about Percy, Rachel and Annabeth. Rachel and Percy don't have any romantic inclinations as such in this book, but there is an underlying element that Annabeth is jealous of Rachel. Now we don't know whether this is in a romantic way or in a friendship way, yet we don't understand that whole dynamic of what's going on with them, but the potential is there for Percy and Rachel to form a relationship. Even though he's just had this whole thing with Calypso, and because he genuinely considered staying with her, it makes you wonder whether he's ready to make the decision about staying or starting a relationship with Rachel or Annabeth. I just wish I could read that all over again, him being with Calypso for the first time. It's such a short scene in relation to the entire series, but there's just something about it, her being alone. She's there as a punishment. Percy feels bad for her. She's nursed him back to health, knowing that when she does find true love that they will leave her because that is her punishment. There was a fly. Who hurt you? So getting back to Rachel, I did think to myself, would it make sense for Percy to date a human? But I'm one of these people that gets really weirdly attached to characters. And because Annabeth was my favourite character, I started to despise Rachel a little bit, and I just wished that she would disappear so that Annabeth could get the ending that she would want. But obviously this is up to nobody bar Rick Riordan what happens, so I was happy to accept whatever fate may come. But Rachel was a little bit of an annoyance for me throughout the books, not gonna lie. We are also introduced to Hera. Hera is Zeus's wife and his sort of like queen of the goddesses, and I was really looking forward to Hera, and I was looking forward to meeting her throughout the whole book. Since the first one, I was really hoping that she would be in the books, and when she is introduced to the books, I was a little bit taken aback because she's not a good person. She's awful to Annabeth, and she's really horrible about Nico as well, and you can tell that she only necessarily cares about her family. Did you see that? Okay, I'm gonna have to get this. Ah! Oh, I need to save it. Okay, hold on. Okay, I saved it. Where was it? Hera. Yeah, she comes across as really not a nice person. She doesn't really seem to like the Half-Bloods at all. I thought that again was a really great addition. It's not something that I would have thought of, making her that type of person. I thought because she just seemed to be like the ultimate woman, that she would be very family orientated. Well, she is, but very loving and very open and very nice. But she's not necessarily that woman. She seems to have a lot of spite, and I'm looking forward to seeing whether she makes a reappearance in other spin-off series. But I'm kind of hoping that Nico has a little bit of like revenge on her. In regards to character development, I really think Percy comes into his own, and he's so much more mature. He makes better informed decisions. He really becomes more of a hero and more of a strong character in his own right in this book, which is the development that he needs to carry him on into the finale, which is what we're going to talk about now. Obviously, if you've not read this book, please stop watching this so it's not spoiled for you. If you have read it, I'm so pleased for you because you've read the series that I love. And please keep watching to find out what my favourite points of this book were. There's a lot happening in this book. Obviously it's the series finale. I just don't know how Rick Riordan managed to fit as much as what he did into this one. My main favourite thing about this entire book is the stuff about Hades and Nico and Bianca's mother. After the scene with Percy and Calypso, I think that is my second favourite scene of the books. Oh my god, I honestly have shivers because it's so good. So we find out all of the questions that Nico has wanted to know all along, which is who is his mother, how did he end up coming out of the hotel, how did he end up in the hotel, what happened truly to him and Bianca as children. We find out that Bianca and Nico are already born when they bring in the law that Zeus, Poseidon and Hades can't have children, and that there will be a prophecy that when one of their children turns 16 that they will be either the downfall of the Olympians or the saviour of the Olympians, but they don't want to take that risk in case it means their downfall. So Hades loves his children so much, and he loves the mother of their children so much, which is a rarity for the gods because usually the gods flick through partners like I don't know what, but Hades truly loves their mother and wants to do the best thing for their children. He's just looking for a way to protect Nico and Bianca, and he's trying to explain to her that Zeus will kill them if he finds them, so they have to be put in a place that's safe for them, and that is maybe to take them and her back to the underworld with him. But she is confident that she's their mother and that she can protect them, but Zeus does end up murdering her. Zeus strikes the hotel that they are in an attempt to kill Bianca and Nico off, and kills a lot of innocent people on the way. So Hades puts them in the hotel where they won't age, so they'll never turn 16, so that they'll never be part of this prophecy. And once another son or daughter turns 16 of his brothers, then he can bring them back out, and he's done his job at protecting them. And I think that is, oh god, that's just such like a Sirius Black moment for me, like in the last book when we realise he's been good all along. And I absolutely loved everything about that. I mean, obviously Hades is still a bad guy, he'd kill Percy in a heartbeat, but that was just such a heartwarming, such an adult scene as well. Like I can't imagine what a 9-year-old would think reading that, but as an adult I was just sort of like, whoa. I had imagined going into this book that Percy being literally a couple of weeks away from turning 16 would be the main focus of this book, but it's actually totally forgotten about, and it's only acknowledged right at the end once everything's all blown over that Percy has actually turned 16, because there's just so much going on. The main thing that happens in this book is that New York gets invaded by Kronos' army, and the Olympians aren't there to push him back because they are fighting something that Percy accidentally woke up in the 4th book, which they see as being a bigger threat to them, and that is also making its way to New York. So if that makes its way to New York with Kronos' army there, everything is just gonna be hopeless, and New York and the Olympians will just be dead. The development and the resolve of that just makes so much sense. For a lot of the book you have this such a hopeless feeling, but you feel like it is going to turn out okay, you just can't see how that would happen. And I thought the way that everything happened, the way Percy helped to resolve it, was just so good. I don't necessarily want to talk about all of that because there's too much to talk about, but I want to focus on the things in this book that made the most sense or I didn't see coming necessarily. So Rachel's obviously a big character in this book, and she is, from the get-go, she thinks that her and Percy should become boyfriend and girlfriend because they've spent a lot of time together, they're always hanging out, and she thinks it's the natural step for their relationship. But before Percy has too much time to think about it, that's when everything kicks off. When he does leave Rachel and come back into the presence of Annabeth, he realises how much more mature she is, he realises that he has some attraction to her, and that he's putting himself in a situation where he needs to choose between her and Rachel. Once Rachel starts doing the drawings, I knew at that point that she would have been the next Oracle. I feel like it was laid out well before it was explained who she was going to be, but some people might have read that and maybe not clicked, and that would have been like a big surprise for them. But for me it wasn't necessarily a surprise, and I was a little bit relieved to know that Oracles couldn't take partners because I really wanted Percy to be with Annabeth. And when that finally happens, I was just like Praise the Lord. We're happy we're having a wedding because I am so excited. Honestly, I've never rooted for the friends to lovers thing as much as what I did with this book series. Even though I'm like a little bit sad about Calypso, oh poor thing, but Annabeth and Percy were just like my end goal, and I just would have been so upset if they hadn't got together. Like, just thinking about it just makes me so upset and so disappointed, but it didn't happen. And I'm hoping for the spin-off series they're still together, nothing bad happens, etc, etc. But yeah, Rachel became the Oracle. What was most interesting for me, however, was that this book revealed everything about Luke's history, and it was seen as a series of visions by the gods to Percy. And it breaks my heart, the whole storyline between Luke's mother and how she ended up that way. So what happened was, Luke's father Hermes, he kept in contact with her and they were happy together. They had Luke, who they both loved very, very much. And Luke's mother knew that she had to send Luke to Camp Half-Blood to be with his people and to be where he belonged. But she thought that because she could see through the mist, that she could be the next Oracle, and that would give her a means to stay in Camp Half-Blood with Luke. What she didn't know is that Hades put a curse on the Oracle at the time, and any subsequent Oracles, that they would go crazy if they tried to become the next Oracle. And that is relating to their part in what Zeus did to the mother of Bianca and Nico. So when she turns up to Camp Half-Blood, nobody knows that once she goes into the attic and she tries to pledge herself to take on the role of the next Oracle, that this curse by Hades kicks in, and this is what makes her the way that she is. And Luke being left with her is what really causes a lot of his problems, because he can't cope. He can't cope, and he thinks that he's been abandoned by his father to live this life with this mother that can't give him everything that what he needs. And that's what makes him resentful of the gods, and starts this whole process off where he is raising Kronos back from this pit. And at the root of all the problems for Kronos, for dealing with Luke, for everything that's gone bad in the book, comes back to the gods' treatment of half-bloods and humans. And this is what Percy tries to address at the end of the book by saying that all half-bloods must be claimed, trained and given respect, because if Luke and Nico had had that respect, they would have turned out differently and they wouldn't have had this problem. But when it comes down to it, Luke was used and abused by Kronos. He was never going to be all-powerful and be able to show his father, like, haha, look what I can do without you. Because he was going to die in the end, because Kronos was just going to use his body as a stepping stone to becoming the ultimate all-powerful, almighty being. And I love that Rick Riordan was able to give Luke's character the agency to undo everything that was gone wrong. He was the hero, Percy wasn't the hero. All Percy had to do in the end was make the decision to trust Luke into giving him his knife back so that he could end him and Kronos. That was, for me, the best possible ending that Rick Riordan could have wrote, because it hasn't been about Percy really the whole time. It's been about Luke and Luke's ability to bring a stop to it and be the hero and to not be the villain anymore. Obviously, Annabeth loved Luke, and he was like the family that she always wanted, and he saved her when she was in a bad time, and he took care of her. And it was hard, and I loved that her character went through so much growth to get to the acceptance that this was going to happen to Luke, this had to happen to Luke, and that she couldn't blame herself for what happened. Another one of the big plot twists in the book was about who was the spy at Camp Half-Blood. And I didn't see that coming, if I'm honest. The spy at Camp Half-Blood turned out to be the daughter of Aphrodite, who I think was she called Selena? Yeah, she's called Selena. Oh, I'm so proud of myself for remembering that, because usually I'm terrible at remembering character names. So she is the girlfriend of Beckendorf, and Beckendorf sacrifices himself at the start of the book because he tries to take out Luke's cruise ship, which has got Kronos on it, it's full of monsters, and he does sacrifice himself to try and kill off as many of them as possible. So I'm surprised that she turned out to be the spy helping Kronos at the end, and I didn't really see that coming. and I didn't really see the logic of it, because she was obviously such a good-hearted character, and at the end she just wanted to be good and to do good and to be back with Beckendorf in whatever way that she could. But let me tell you, when Clarice goes off on that dragon thing, oh my god. So obviously Selena's death is used as a catalyst for Clarice to just lose her poop. I really don't want to swear. And she goes into full daughter of Ares mode, and at the end Ares is like so proud of his daughter and he makes such a big deal out of it. And for Clarice, who is seen as this kid who is troubled and she doesn't really like anyone, she finds it hard to make personal relationships, the fact that it all comes happy for her in the end, I'm so pleased. And I'm really hoping that Clarice is a character that is also in Heroes of Olympus, and I really hope she does well. Hello, it's me in editing, and I realised I didn't talk about one of the major plot points, which was that at the very end Percy turned down actually becoming one of the gods, because that's what Zeus and Poseidon offered him as a reward. And I really love that he turned it down, but it was obviously for the reason because of Annabeth. Because if he became one of the gods, he would then outlive her, because he would live like an infinite amount, but she would still have a human lifespan, and they couldn't be together. So I was just, honestly, that was the cutest thing ever. I mean, turning down that is like such a big thing. So I want to know what your what your thoughts were on him turning down a chance to become a everlasting almighty god and then be with his father forever, because that's kind of all Percy wanted, was to have this relationship and bond with his father, and that would have given that. So let me know what your thoughts were on that. Percy and Beth, I love them, so cute. Okay, so I think I've spoke for quite a long time now about this series, and you know, I do actually need to do things today. I think it's actually been over an hour. I'm okay. Okay, I need to wrap this up. So basically, what do I think about this series now that I've read it, now that I've discussed it from a spoilery perspective? I absolutely don't think I've read a series that I've loved as much as this one ever, and that includes the Harry Potter series, that includes everything I've ever read. I absolutely loved this so much. I loved Annabeth and Percy's relationship developing from them being friends at 12 years old into being into a romantic boyfriend-girlfriend relationship at 16. I just love it so much. Grover as well has quite a transformation. At the start he is sort of seen as this not very successful person, but at the end he's basically the god of the wilderness, which is just immense. And Tyson as well, he does so well. I'm surprised that he spent quite a lot of time away from Percy, because he seemed like he was going to depend on Percy quite a bit for protection and for growth, but he really doesn't. He is okay leaving him multiple times to go off and fight his own wars. And I love that Poseidon is so good to him as well. The main disappointments in these books were the gods themselves, but that was the point. I didn't like that they were just having children willy-nilly and just letting them get a lot, just basically cracking on. They were just born and then left to just get on with themselves. Even though monsters were finding them and they were growing up with parental issues, because they had this whole half of their life which was just neglected. And like any children, they're just trying to prove themselves worthy of their parents' love, affection and pride, which they aren't given, and which then results into what happened with Luke. So overall, this series goes over so many issues that I think children would face about trying to be good, about your relationships with your parents. I don't know. When I finished reading this series, I had this feeling that I hadn't felt in a long time, and that was genuine movement. I felt genuinely moved by this series. I know this sounds so stupid, but it's true. I just had so much emotional love for this book. I will see you in my next video, which will be my July TBR. I've already picked out the books that I want to read and it's exciting. But thank you for being here and listening to me just gush about this series non-stop. I mean, there's so much to it. You could sit here for an entire day and not say everything about this book. So let me know in the comments what you think. Especially let me know in your comments about Nico, about Calypso and about Annabeth and Percy, but remember to make them non-spoilery, and if you are going to spoil, put them in the reply to your comment. And I will see you in the next video. Bye guys.